Yeah, fantastic forms.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the welcome to the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study Committee Advisory Group for a meeting for January 12th, 2026. Gotta remember that when I write checks. There's a 5-minute slice here of time for chair's remarks, and I want to say a few things. So I'll take up all of that 5 minutes probably. This is the last community advisory group meeting. So first of all, just in time. So I want to start by saying thank you to all the members of the advisory committee, and I'm going to get to the rest of the people who are in this room in just a moment. We're an advisory group convened by staff. We're not required to vote on or present a report. But the debate that's gone on here about height, setbacks, design, the impacts on the neighborhood and the town from changes in zoning have all had an effect on what the planning staff is going to be bringing to the town meeting in May. And I think it's reasonable to say that between your comments and what we've heard from the public, there's also been quite an impact on the development proposal for the technical office park. I also want to thank all the members of the public who've offered their views. The first development sketches for the Chestnut Hill Office Park and the most recent sketches are quite a contrast. And that's partly due to what we heard from all of you. The zoning proposal has been shaped to accommodate public concerns about traffic, especially traffic on Heath Street, pedestrian access from Heath to Route 9, the office park, and setbacks and stepbacks to minimize the visual impact of tall buildings, tree canopy, especially along the west boundary, the overall open space and public space in the development. We certainly don't have consensus among either advisory group members or members of the public about the appropriate allowable height of buildings, but the setback and step back requirements of zoning that we all debated will certainly push the tallest buildings to the east side of the office park and separate them from the homes west of the study area. And I think we'll actually separate them visually as well as physically. When I refer to the public, I'm referring to the immediate neighbors, of course, but more broadly to the residents of Brookline. Commercial development in this study area is going to have a substantial impact on Brookline, not just a fiscal impact. We talk a lot about the financial impact, but we're expecting an expanded and enhanced Chestnut Hill retail community that will benefit both the neighborhood and the rest of the town during the course of the additional housing. So assuming that the zoning proposal that is still in the works and supposed to be worked out by the planning department is accepted by town meeting, you'll all be contributors to those changes that I see as being quite positive, and I want to say thank you to all of you from one end of the work to the other. Okay, let's start with the zoning. And do you want to give an update on where you are with the overlay district zoning?
Sure. So we've continued to refine the zoning. An updated draft circulated yesterday. We're going to talk through some of the key changes, I think, after Sasaki's presentation. So Ethan and Martin are going to present where we're at in terms of the massing control section, in particular of the design guidelines, which reflects a lot of the key zoning components. So I'm going to turn it over to Ethan and/or Martin, who are with us virtually. And then I'll follow up with sort of a summary slide deck.
Excellent. Thank you for having us. And I'll just say, again, it's been great working with all of you and with the team to sort of revise and refine these in lieu of the comments that we did here. And Ethan's going to help us out by sort of explaining and running through the changes that we have. So thanks in advance, and I'll let you take it from here, Ethan.
Sure, sounds good. Can everybody hear me okay in the room?
Louder. Louder.
Okay, so again, this is the massing controls chapter of a broader design guideline package that will accompany the zoning. And the massing controls are really focusing on the key dimensional regulations that will impact building heights, as well as their required setbacks and upper level step backs where applicable, separate from the architectural character, which is addressed in some detail in other chapters of the design guidelines. So this is a map showing the proposed heights, which are also reflected in the latest draft of the zoning that was shared. So as we can see in the 4.0 district, the western side of that is capped at 88 feet within about 170 feet of the westernmost property boundary there. And then in the darker red, really in the center of that 4.0 district, which spans either side of Tully Street, you can build up to 150 feet in the base zoning and then up to 175 feet through a bonus. You qualified for that by going from providing about 50% commercial to over 60% commercial. One change from where we were before the holidays is you can see on the easternmost edge of the 4.0 district along Holly Lane, there's a 60-foot upper level step back essentially where the height is capped at 88 feet. And this was done to help transition from this taller massing into the 3.0 and NMU sub-districts to the east. And there's also been some changes in the heights of those districts. If you recall, the 3.0 district had previously been in the 125-foot range. We've reduced that to 88 feet, and then that tapers down additionally into the NMU neighborhood mixed use district with a base of 50 feet with a bonus going up to 75 feet.
Mike, wait, you want to hold questions? Or?
Hang on just 1 second, please. Yeah, I would, I think I would like to wait until the presentation's done and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I had a question about the 88.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Hold on to that.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
And thanks. And so then also within the transit-oriented mixed-use district north of Route 9 here, we're also using that 88-foot maximum height limit. So you're kind of aligning with the heights across Route 9 with the 3.0, and then that steps down to 75 feet max further to the north along Hammond Street. So in addition to the building heights, we've made some updates on the ground level setbacks and build-to lines. So essentially, the majority of the district has a 5-foot build-to line. And what this will do is require developments to essentially be set back by 5 feet from the existing property lines to accommodate for additional public realm. As more density is added to this area, the existing sidewalks and street furnishings are inadequate for that increased level of density. So this will provide a little bit of additional space for people to walk and for landscaping features. And it will also prevent buildings from being set too far back from the street in order to create a continuous street wall. And along the back of the transit-oriented mixed-use district where we have a 0-foot minimum setback. So theoretically, a development could build up to that line. It's obviously contingent on what might happen in Newton. And then along Heath Street, in this orange line, you can see we're holding a 25-foot minimum setback all the way to Holly Lane. On the westernmost end of the 4.0 district, we have a 40-foot minimum setback. And then this green line indicates a 55-foot maximum setback. So a development could theoretically build, within this hatched area. And, one of the conversations from our last meeting was related to this concept of frontage ratio, which was essentially a way to try to regulate through block connections and porosity, primarily in the 4.0 district west of Tully Street. That's the largest block by far. And there was a desire to prevent a continuous wall of development. And I know the proposed development scheme changed over the course of the last year or so to have more north-south oriented buildings to create more of a rhythm and breaks in the development scale for folks as they move along Heath Street and Route 9. So really those two frontages of the 4.0 district have a lower frontage ratio, 70 to 80%. And that essentially means that you need to have roughly 20 to 30% of through block connections. The remainder of the district can be within the 80 to 100% threshold. This diagram illustrates in a little bit more detail kind of how that would be measured, looking at the percentage of the frontage that is occupied by buildings in blue. So this indicates, all these buildings taking up about 75% of that total block width, leaving 25% for pass-through block connections that are further regulated by the open space requirements in the zoning as to, how much of it needs to be hardscape, softscape, what the landscaping looks like. In addition to the overall frontage ratio, we wanted to ensure that larger buildings that are typical with this scale of development can be broken up just with the architectural and massing expressions. So for buildings that are longer than 200 feet, we're requiring that there's an inset that accounts for about 30% of that length of the building facade. And along Heath Street, we're requiring that inset to be a minimum of 65 feet deep to provide further relief on that frontage. Whereas along Route 9, we're only requiring that inset to be 15 feet. So that further reinforces some of the massing moves with north-south building orientation that start to break up this larger block. This is an updated zoning envelope diagram. So we're seeing the 4.0 district over here on the left, on the west-hand side. So similar to the height diagram we looked at. Initially, you can see over on the west side, we're capping it at that 88-foot height. And then the remainder of the 4.0 district in the middle is in this 150-foot height limit with a 25-foot bonus. And then as you get over to Holly Lane, it steps back down again to 88 feet. And that can get you comfortably to 7 levels. And then as we move further east, the CHC 3.0 district has been reduced to 88 feet. Again, kind of aligning with that western edge of Holly Lane and the transit-oriented mixed-use district across Route 9. And then the neighborhood mixed use is 50 feet with a 25-foot height bonus up to 75 feet. One thing we'll be able to see in some street sections soon is the addition of a upper level step back along Heath Street above the fourth level in the NMU district. So you can just barely make it out in this, but we'll see that soon enough. And just one thing to note here, this massing envelope here shows the 25-foot minimum setback from Heath Street. And this version shows the 55-foot maximum setback. So the development could theoretically come in with massing that would be, in between those two ranges. We'll just kind of toggle back and forth here. So, looking from the other side, all the same numbers, but again, you can see the height really being concentrated within the core of the 4.0 district, tapering down to the west and to the east. And in addition to the heights and the setback requirements, this diagram starts to indicate what those through block connections would look like in gray. So showing along the 4.0 district that higher level of porosity, roughly 25% through block connections, in addition to the inset requirements along this larger 200-foot plus long mass here. And then also, having a requirement for a through block connection of some dimension in the 4.0 block between Holly and Tully, as well as within the transit-oriented mixed-use district to help break up those larger masses. So these are some images just showing how upper level step backs can start to differentiate the ground level massing from upper level massing, and in some cases help building heights to recede. And I know in lower levels, we're also looking at introducing or requiring some architectural relief or cornice lines, horizontal datums that help to delineate between the first 1 to 3 levels, depending on the district, to emphasize the public realm and create more of a consistent horizontal banding throughout the district. So we'll move through a few of the street sections now, starting on Heath Street. So here you can see along Heath Street, there's a required 10-foot step back within the 4.0 district. That'll be above either level 3 or 4, depending on the specific building. And then again, above level 7 or 8. So that varies just because certain buildings may have parking structures or different uses. So to try to maintain as consistent of a height as possible, you want to build in some flexibility for which level exactly that is. As we move further east on Heath Street, this is one of those changes from the last iteration here, where the NMU district is now including a 10-foot step back for massing above the 4th level. So really the base zoning is for 50 feet, 4-story buildings here that would have a horizontal datum or cornice element required above the 1st or 2nd level. And then if bonus was awarded up to 75 feet or 6 levels, there would be that additional 10-foot step back required along Heath Street to help transition to the residential neighborhood to the south. So this section is cut through Holly Lane. So again, you can start to see the at street level here, the existing right of way and how the addition of these 5-foot setbacks due to the build to lines that we referenced earlier are pretty important in terms of providing a more comfortable public realm relative to the new proposed building heights. So we're seeing the NMU district on the right-hand side with the levels 5 and 6 and the lighter orange that are awarded via the bonus. And then on the left, we're seeing that 4.0 district. And this is the new piece here with the 60-foot step back required above 88 feet or level 7. And then the lighter orange up at the top with indicating the 25-foot bonus. This section along Sheaf Street, just showing the 3.0 district up to 88 feet, 7 stories on the left, and then the NMU district on the right. So then looking at the Route 9 section, so this is all the way down at the western end of the site. So we're cutting through that lower height, that 88-foot height limit, all the way on the west side of the 4.0 district. And then as we move further east, we're getting into that taller massing, the 150-foot base up to 175 with the bonus. And one difference along Route 9 is we're building in some flexibility to have those upper level step backs be in the 5 to 10 foot range, whereas we're requiring them to be the full 10 feet along Heath Street. So this is an existing view looking east of the 4.0 district. What this massing starts to look like and some of the allowable uses, residential, office, hotel, residential, and we're seeing, potential massing on what is the current growth company's surface parking lot in the back here. And the top 2 levels here indicate the bonus heights up to 175. Here's a quick visualization of what that could potentially start to look like. And then we also wanted to take a closer look at the transit-oriented mixed-use district here. So this is a section cut through Hammond Street, through if you remember, the portion of the TOM district that's along Route 9. The proposed heights are 88 feet, and then they step down to 75 feet to the north. So this section is through that 88-foot portion. And similar to the other sub-districts, there's that horizontal datum or massing relief cornice element above level 1 or 2. So this is the existing condition with the CVS looking north up Hammond Street. This is the zoning envelope. So it could allow for, well, it requires ground level commercial, but it allows for residential, hotel, similar to other sub-districts. And then a quick sketch of what that could potentially look like. So I'll pause there. I'm sure there's questions, and I'll just say that there's also we have some additional street sections if folks are curious about other areas within the district.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Ken, you had a question?
So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify the use of 88 feet is the parameter. I understand that that's going to accommodate a 5/2 stick over podium building. Am I correct in saying that you can't have residential above 85 feet though? And I'm kind of curious, there's such a specific number for the ADA.
It provides the most amount of flexibility should say there be a demand for additional commercial space in the future, because the commercial levels would want taller floor to floors.
Okay, so you weren't thinking
And also
about multifamily or mixed use with the stick over podium type of construction then necessarily?
Yeah, it would certainly accommodate your typical 5/2, but it builds in a little bit additional flexibility should you want additional commercial levels in a vertical mixed use project, or if say you wanted to do like a taller penthouse level, or you needed a deeper structure or something like that on the roof.
Any other?
But definitely, yeah, it definitely anticipates a very typical 5/2, though. It would accommodate that.
Other comments on the,
Same.
on these? I have a couple of questions. So
Yeah, following the same, if they could just for the general public, they can just break it down by floors for each district or each area.
Sure.
You mean number of stories?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah, have those stories. Yeah, typically.
So 85 or 88 feet is typically a 7-story building. And where else is the next break? The next break is at 150 feet. And that would be 12 and 175 with the bonus for over for 60% commercial is 14.
And then in the NMU district, a 50-foot height would accommodate 4 stories. And then the bonus height with the addition of more affordable units would allow you to go up to 6 stories. And in the TOM district, 88 feet is 7 and 70 feet is 6.
So there could be, so there are bonus floors on the dark red,
And the 4.0.
4.0.
Yeah.
And then there are bonus floors in the MU and MU. And both of those are 2 floors.
Yes.
Right, one for additional commercial and one for additional affordable housing
Or hotel and then.
or hotel. In the NMU.
I have a question. The last time when you made a presentation, there was some concern among people familiar with the details and costs of construction about small setbacks at the point where you have a cornice, and it looks like that those have been eliminated in this version. Is that correct?
I think there was the question about
So
effectiveness of the 6 to 12 inch horizontal datum.
Yeah.
And I think there was a slide that Ethan had where it was providing examples of that. So I think that was sort of circling back to the conversation from last meeting, but I would be curious to hear if people feel it was effective.
Well, what's interesting about that slide is if you can go back to the slide where you have all the renderings, they're all
Photographs.
no, they were renderings.
Of the horizontal datum.
The change in material. I think they were all.
Yeah,
That one. There we go.
That one.
Yeah, this one.
They're all no. Well, one of them is a photo. The other ones are rendering.
Right.
So those hard to know.
Hard to know.
What's interesting here is that everything is actually so we have 6 floors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, one of them is 12 floors, but the other ones are all about 6 floors, which is sort of interesting to see the scale. It's also I think this is very effective on the very urban, much urban scale. I'm not sure how effective it is when it's not so urban or not so sort of surrounded by urban fabric. But I will say that the Northlands project, which just got the $200 million funding, does use this pretty effectively. Sometimes too much going on, but the way of breaking down the massing. The question, I guess, is, you know, do you do? Because here we have, I guess, 2 floors, and then we have 4 floors. You know, where is the right place, and then how is that translated in the guidelines? about change of materials, compatible materials. Because if you do glass and glass, it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Is that something that you folks, Martin or anything that you'd like to address?
Sure, I think it's a good point, and one thing we were looking at that is different in where those horizontal datums are required between the sub-districts is on the 4.0 where you have taller buildings, we're providing, well, first of all, we're providing flexibility to do that datum or the step backs within a range. So in the 4.0 where we have taller buildings, that first moment is within the third or fourth floor. And in the 4.0, it's actually a building step back of like 5 or up to 10 feet. So it's more appreciable. And it's a little bit easier for development of that scale to take that up. As we move further east and the buildings get lower, we're changing that first horizontal datum to be not a step back, but really a facade articulation or a cornice level. And we're changing that height to be between the first and the second level. So we're bringing it down to a smaller scale. So hopefully that starts to kind of address that observation.
So that, I think that answers the question that I was raising, because of the facade, even though it would have a cornice, would be in the same plane from top to bottom. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're trying to build in the most amount of flexibility for developers, architects in the future to create an expression or a horizontal datum
Right.
or a cornice.
Maybe I should say could be in the same plane, because we were concerned about sort of 6-inch and 1 foot relief that would be problematic from a cost and and building perspective.
But if you go to slide 26, Tully Street, I think that shows, if you squint to this image,
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
next one, no, 26.
This one has it.
26. Yeah.
Keep on going.
It might be lagging a little bit. Yeah. Here we go. 23, 24, 25, 26.
This, next. There's another.
Rendering.
There you go.
No, there's a 26 on the presentation was Tully street section with massing Tully in 4.0.
That was
No,
it.
there's another that's more dramatic.
No, it's
Is
not.
it in parentheses, Carlos?
It's in the appendix yet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
If you squint at this image, you basically see what you would see, which is that you don't actually see that 6-inch
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
So here you have Tully with
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
with 5 foot sidewalk or whatever that is. The 5 foot setback,
Right.
the 5 foot sidewalk. And then you have the change in material, the first 3 floors, and then the next 7 floors.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty dramatic image to see. Is this what we're thinking of, or is this more of like what you see in the seaport?
Well, I think if you look at, if we, just to go back a little bit on 26, I think there's a good indication, and we're trying to define the 6 to 12 inch, not as a setback per se, but as written, massing relief cornice element. And so if you go back to 26, Ethan, if you would. Oh, sorry,
Right.
it's a little bit jumpy, I think.
What
Yeah, keep
the
forward.
the rendering?
Yeah, the rendering. 27, sorry. Yeah, right here. So it's interesting to see the difference between a setback and then this 6 to 12 inch, cornice. So here we're really calling it, a substantial setback where there's a change in the plane. But here it's basically, an expression of that cornice line and a change in material. So it's quite interesting and it can be effective. The way it sort of fools the eye a little bit, just to get that break in the facade to sort of bring down the scale of the building, which is typically, in your 2-story range. And then, from there, the building goes a little bit higher. So a little bit of a difference between a setback and then this sort of, cornice element that we thought provided that flexibility, but still, gives you the expression. And Ethan mentioned it sort of varies from block to block so that it's not completely uniform, the way that it then, helps to sort of create something which is more urban looking, a little bit more varied from block to block, which it really should be. It should be stepping up and down.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no doubt that, I mean, it's very effective in the change of material. It's just that when you look at a street like Tully and see this section, which, it may not look anything like this because this is just the zoning envelope, but it accentuates what could happen volume wise, and regardless of what the materials are.
Yes, you're right.
Carla Baker is online. Carla has her hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mike. One of my questions was how many feet do you assume for a floor or a story? And I thought rule of thumb was 10. So I don't necessarily understand how 88 feet becomes 7 stories. But putting that aside, just thinking about the north side of Route 9, where the CVS is now, it seems unrealistic to me to have that type of development potential, given the fact that you're right next to a residential neighborhood and you're right next to the city of Newton, which brings me to my next question, and that is whether Brookline staff has discussed any of this with planning staff in Newton.
So we have had several meetings with Brookline planning staff. There's now a big transition in Newton's planning department with the new mayoral administration coming in.
Right.
I think new planning staff might just be getting their feet under them, but we will certainly circle back to them and provide an update.
So what kind of conversation did you have with the old planning staff?
Let them know about the study that we were undertaking, study objectives, sort of discussions around concepts around height and density, and the fact that City Realty have been presenting some specific redevelopment concepts.
So have they seen the proposed zoning?
They have not seen the most recent draft that was circulated yesterday, no.
Have you talked to them about this corner in particular? Because we haven't really focused on this.
We have separately also had conversations with the transportation planning staff in Newton regarding more as in the context of the transportation study. But yes, we've had discussions with them about potential additional density here, and then goals are in terms of connectivity throughout the study area, and trying to optimize sort of that Chestnut Hill proximity.
And what kind of response did you get, or what were their comments?
So they agreed with us about opportunities to provide more bike and pedestrian connections sort of along the backside of the street, and connecting the Hammond Pond Park pathway over to sort of the T station, which would involve like collaborations with private property, but that made sense to them. We talked about the shared goal of wanting to provide safer connections in terms of bike and pedestrian crossings around the Hammond and Boylston Street intersection, providing better connectivity to the T station as well. So, we've certainly been keeping Newton in the loop about our proposed rezoning and vision for connectivity to an appropriate extent.
And are there plans to talk to the Chestnut Hill Neighborhood Association, the Newton's Chestnut Hill Neighborhood Association, about this?
Prior to town, I think that's certainly something we would be open to. I think that there's going to be a lot of meetings if the select board gives us the direction to move forward with this proposal and presenting it to town meeting. So I think the priorities would be for Brookline focus groups. But we'll certainly be open to that, Carla.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One last, to me, I feel like the setback, the 5-foot setback on Route 9 is just too small. We're doing the same setback for the smaller streets. And so one of the successful, so when you look at Boylston Street, for example, down in Back Bay, it has a much wider sidewalk. That part of Boylston Street has always been like the lost brother of Dewberry field, but until they went through a whole upgrade with Mayor Menino at the end to sort of eradicate that change, and they put the hotel. They did all kinds of things to that street to make it work, but it always had nice wide sidewalks, which allow for retail to have cafes and other things on the sidewalk. And the more people you see on the sidewalk, in a way, the slower traffic goes, or the more sort of less highway-ish something feels.
Right.
So for that reason, I feel like Route 9 sidewalk needs to be way wider than definitely what we have now, but also than the other sidewalks. There needs to be, like, if you go to the seaport, you have a hierarchy of sidewalk widths depending on the importance of those streets. Seaport Boulevard has much wider than smaller streets and so forth. Here we're treating every street the same way, with that initial 5-foot setback. And I think it's a missed opportunity. I mean, the biggest problem I had with Raj's project is that
There is no setback.
that the planning board never pushed, so sort of, well, they couldn't really do much, but to have a setback, it actually overhangs the sidewalk. And the same thing happened down here at the old Dunkin' Donuts,
They help.
but
Yeah.
no, the Dunkin' Donuts, well, the Hilton's one, but the Dunkin' Donuts, 20 Boylston Street, which there we did get 5 feet or so of sidewalk, and it's a huge difference. But if you could get 10 feet,
Right.
Then there's really a possibility of,
Well, let's ask the question, and also Meredith, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I just had a clarification. So you're saying make the Boylston Street setbacks 10 to allow for the potential for like outdoor dining and a cafe culture on Boylston Street? Because I just don't see that being
well,
something that would happen
I
given.
think we have it across the street.
I think you could set back. If the property line is set back 5 feet, if there's a setback 5 feet from the property line, which is what you're suggesting, there could also be, you can also undercut the first story, let's say 7 feet. So you could build out over that, but the first floor would be set back, could be set back up to 12 feet. We were talking about that when we did the other commercial area planning a few years ago, that you could get additional setback by just using an overhang on the first level, which would be the commercial level.
But I guess I'm just wondering in terms of like creating a inviting ground floor space and a welcoming, like, what is the benefit, particularly since we have the ground floor commercial requirement, to having this recessed entryway? Like
It's a better experience on Route 9
Yeah.
for the pedestrian.
So,
If we don't treat it differently from a highway, if we don't see it as differently from a highway, which is now it almost looks like a divided highway, then it's never going to be anything other than a divided highway.
What are the setbacks in the other commercial areas, though? There's no setback for the commercial buildings
In Newton,
in Brookline. Or,
well,
I
but
don't know.
they're not on Route 9. So they're what we're trying to do here too is to change what looks like a divided highway, which doesn't go very fast because there's a lot of traffic on it, make it look like more like an urban street.
so it's a really interesting question. I think one thing to remember is, at least along the Chestnut Hill Office Park section of it, there won't be a building right there. because their internal circulation requirement, there'll be a
Well,
drive.
not if, I mean, whatever project they're proposing, that's what they're showing, but
Yeah.
the zoning is.
I appreciate that the zoning is this zoning, but in order to accommodate circulation and keep it off of Route 9, keep it off of
But again,
Main Street, they have to. do
we're
that.
approving it zoning.
Yeah,
If they flip it and they abandon whatever they were proposing,
yeah, yeah,
and now they go back to slide 2 or 3, whichever one it is that shows the envelopes.
yeah,
And it has, because actually their project now is saying, let's go back to, there is a build 2 line, right?
That one.
The guidelines have a build 2 line, which is now, what's the purple?
Purple is 5 foot.
Right,
Yes, 5 foot.
Which block are you talking about? Because
the first,
the first block of 4.0 does not have a build 2 line along Boylston Street. It's only in the second block.
It's a minimum setback.
Yeah, we don't want to regulate. We want to give them that opportunity to have that drive there.
well, that begs the question is, why are we treating that differently from the rest of the zone?
Good question. I
So if
don't
we
know
do-
the question. I just want to make sure that.
Because they have a
That's-
very,
if we
Sasaki
remember-
has a really good point,
Yeah.
which is when you're creating an urban fabric.
Yeah.
And by doing 12 floors, we're creating an urban
Oh, yeah,
fabric.
yeah.
The difference between suburban and urban has always been where the building stands in relationship to the street.
Mhm.
Urban is closer to the curb.
Yeah.
Suburban
Mhm.
is further away from the curb.
Right.
And there are books written about this. And that's why they brought into this whole discussion, the build 2 line.
Yeah.
Which is what defines the space. And what we're trying to define here is sort of the street and the building. And I'm guessing because we have a project on board, the build 2 line is not on on that first block. But if we started from scratch,
Mhm.
the build 2 line, block number 2 would look exactly like block number 1 with the build 2 line. Because what you're trying to achieve is sort of that urban line. And that's the whole reason for the build 2 line. It's been used on urban campuses where you're trying to create quads. You have a build 2 to create that space.
I think one of the differences though, in that first block, as you recall, is that we also didn't want Heath Street to become part of the circulation pattern for that block. Right, and part of the impact of that is that it carries internal circulation requirements into.
But we're not, zoning is not showing anything about circulation
You're
here.
talking about between Tully and Holly, really. That's what
Well,
you're talking about.
Right, no,
But also, I mean, zoning doesn't say anything about circulation.
No, I understand.
So if they sell the land,
Right. Well, which one are you focused on, Collins? Are you asking for a deeper setback along the whole stretch of the 4.0 and also on the 3.0?
on the 3, yes. Yes, the whole stretch.
Okay. right.
But also it should be consistent because
Oh, I agree.
because that's what you're trying to do. Now,
Yeah, I just want to know
what
what you
Michael just brought up
getting.
is another good point, is just like the zoning doesn't actually, isn't guaranteeing that the circulation is to be separated. It's just saying, this is where the build envelope is, right? There's no circulation anywhere. So they could, another, or even the same group of people could just say, you know what, now we're gonna ignore the circulation part. We have the zoning that we can do up to here, and that's it.
Can I ask about the open space?
Go ahead.
Is the open space regulated by the zoning? Or is it regulated by the dimensional requirements that we saw laid out in one of the diagrams?
So there's the open space requirements in the zoning.
You mean landscape and stuff? No, I mean, can you put that other I don't know what number it is, but it's got the dimensional requirements for the open areas on the site. That's it. That's it. The upper,
Number 6.
yeah, the upper diagram.
Oh,
Just a question.
Yeah, this
Is
is separate from the
Yeah,
open
so-
space requirements.
So my question is, I guess you answered it. It's regulated by the zoning bylaw itself, the open space requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
However, what I don't see is anything that the town has taken for this upzoning area, the upzoning the whole thing. For example, an infrastructure portion, like how about a park at the corner or an open space area at the corner? Have you looked at, taking something back because you're giving so much in the
But we've had
in the upzone?
there's we can ask for, this is where the 2% for infrastructure comes in. Is it
Street
not?
cake, right? Is that what you're?
So we have a 2% of the total of the hard costs are being contributed back by, at least in the case of, in the course of discussing things with City Realty, would be contributed back to the town. And we would anticipate the same sort of arrangement with really any developer,
That's actually in the zone. That's not,
the 2%.
the
Okay,
2% is.
yeah, 2% is in the, so that you're getting back a contribution in funding for some of the things that you're talking about.
So
Yeah.
Is that a satisfactory?
Well, it's
Clear
only,
up yet?
it's only halfway satisfactory.
Okay, fine.
Because I think it's a good, it's a good start.
Yeah.
But sorry,
You finish, Mike.
but I would like to see a designated spot, like a place
so
that you say, we're taking this corner because, or we're taking the two corners on either side of this road. It could, because the example of what happened on Hammond Street with the 40B development, is just terrible as far as I'm concerned.
It
You know,
is.
I saw a guy on a cherry picker. He was sandwiched between the telephone pole and the transformers that were up there,
Yeah.
and he was putting the windows in,
Yeah.
or he was caulking the windows. And I'm going, holy
You can
where's OSHA on this one?
You can touch the transformers from the house, from the building.
Yeah, so
Pretty much.
So the 5-foot setback will deal with that, but I get the point, just the same.
Yeah, and the other point is, I actually think that you could set the setbacks up, but I think you can also designate areas within the context of the sites.
So there are open space requirements in the zoning. There are large site open space in the CH4, in the 4.0 district. Like there are tree canopy requirements also in the zoning. And then, of course, there are the wider setbacks.
And there's landscape open space.
see,
Yeah, I had one other point that I just want to make quick, and that is, where is the parking? Is it all under the building? It's never decked.
so, and the parking can't exceed total parking can't be more than, no more than 2% of your parking can be at the surface level. So we're assuming that it's either below ground or.
But
within-
is the footprint of the parking under the buildings, or is it
No, in the first 2 floors.
not all of it?
Building A is proposed to have.
Are you asking a zoning question or are you asking a?
It's a zoning question, yeah, because you could say that you could have X number of parking, or you could have whatever parking requirement you want, or you don't want, or you want to regulate it. But then you could say, where is it?
Well, it's not on the surface.
Okay, so is it under a building?
Well, if it's not on the surface, it could be anywhere from under the building to the roof of the building. What difference does it make?
Well, the difference is that if it's a parking structure underground, you have limited landscape on top of it. And having done a lot of these things, I know that it's going to be a hardscape ultimately. Because
But
you're not going to get
Right.
that kind of loading to do landscape on top of underground parking garages.
It also changes how the interaction of the lower floors with the sidewalk. If it's
Certainly does.
solid because it's a parking garage.
I'm just saying it could be part of the zoning.
So Mark, there is, so right now in the Chestnut Hill 4, we have a minimum of 15% of the lot area dedicated to landscape open space. And then the hard surface can't exceed more than 30% of the total required open space. And then in addition to that, we have an additional 5% of the lot area will be dedicated to this large site open space, which was sort of a new definition that we came up with, but that requires at least 4,000 contiguous square feet, no less than 40 feet in any dimension. It has to be sort of centrally located and visible and usable to the public. So I do feel like the spirit of what you were talking about is what we have here on the website.
I think, you know, you're covering it, but I would like to see, like, for example, if you, and these are bad examples in the massing sense, but if you drive down Babcock Street, for example, there's a couple of open triangular park areas where the streets come together. Then there's designated areas, you know, in other spots. You know, there's designated areas that the town has put aside. So I'm just wondering if what we want to have Sasaki do is suggest some dedicated open areas that we would stipulate within the context of, you know, those parcels. Although it's regulated, do we want it anywhere? Do we want to create an urbanism in that area? How do, you know, do we want to suggest it ourselves?
There is if Ethan, if you could go to the slide that shows the pedestrian access through from Heath to 9. There we go. So no, sorry, you've gone.
Right.
Well, okay, that one's fine. So
Yeah.
the gray areas are where there needs to be, you could move them left or right, but the width is required in the guidelines for pedestrian access from north to south across
I
the
think it's
site.
actually in the zone.
So sorry, it's in the zone, not the cap.
So what happens if, as someone mentioned, if it gets flipped?
Well, if it's in the zoning, it's in the zoning, it's in the zoning.
Can I speak to that
Uh,
quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thank
Jennifer,
you.
yeah.
So there will be a memorandum of agreement, and when the zoning is passed and approved, it gets put on record. And in the MOA, it deals with no access on Heath Street and all of the things that the developer has promised. And so if it were flipped, any successor or sign would be obligated to comply with the MOA. And if they couldn't or didn't want to, they'd have to go back through this whole process again.
Okay, is that a clear answer? Because, and I think there are, that was done with Walden Durgan.
Every overlay.
It was done with Newbury College and there's another.
Everson.
Okay, I was looking for a third.
And then me too, wasn't the one, the Children's Hospital?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and-
Welltower's Newbury, yeah.
And then, Mark, could we have a follow-up conversation to just go over how open space is currently defined and see if there's any opportunity in the zoning or in the design guidelines to kind of speak to
Sure.
what you're talking about? Okay.
Sure. And just one last comment would be that it's, if it's embedded in the massing for the larger 4.0 area, then, you know, if we could do a little bit more with the edges in the lower zones, that might make it even more pedestrian friendly. And it might even open up a spine, for example, in the back. What's that street that goes? Sheaf Street.
Oh, okay.
You know, it might even open up a spine there for a more a different
block.
cross block, more a spine for a different type of commercial that might come into lower buildings.
Yep. Okay,
Can I just ask,
sorry, so Linda has been patient, Linda Roseman has been patiently waiting. Linda, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. I wanted to go back to something Carlos raised. Does anybody know how wide the sidewalk is in front of, you know, the FedEx and the whatever else is on that block? That seems like a nice wide sidewalk to me. Is it? Am
I
I?
think I think it's 10.
In front of
In front of the center.
It's essentially what's existing.
Justin, do you
Yeah.
think?
You think?
How big it is?
How wide-
wide
how-
is it?
I don't know how wide it is, but I think it is wider in front of the FedEx as opposed to going towards the Bank of America. It starts to narrow.
Well, I think it's actually pretty much the same. I walk that stretch a lot because I use the V Care pharmacy, which, by the way, is the most fabulous pharmacy there is. And I think, to Carlos's point, I'm not thinking about cafes on Route 9, but I think as a pedestrian, especially because it's a state highway and it's so highway-like, unlike, say, Beacon Street, just in terms of pedestrian comfort, it makes sense to me to make it, I don't know how much wider you can make it. I think 5 feet is way too narrow. And I hope that, you'll consider doing a
It's not,
wider
so it's not the sidewalk that's 5 feet, it's the setback from the property line.
Well, doesn't that create a narrow sidewalk?
No, it would be adding to the perception of the width of the sidewalk.
This, if the sidewalk is, whether it's 5 feet or 10 feet wide, that 5 foot, that the sidewalk is the right of way of the town. The 5 foot setback is from that line.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Apparently I don't, but that's.
Okay, let's try it again, okay? You have the
Let me ask you
wall.
this. How wide is the sidewalk going to be there? That's all I want to know. I don't care about
Good
that.
question.
But that's not really the only question. The question
Okay.
is from the edge of the sidewalk furthest from the street to
Yes,
the building wall
yes.
where that 5 foot setback is.
So it could be as narrow as 5 feet from curb to building.
No, you're forgetting the width of the sidewalk.
Oh, so starting at the end of the sidewalk closest to the property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right away.
There is a property line between the curb and the building.
Okay.
And between that property line and the curb is part of the public way,
Right.
right? And between that property line and the building would be part of the setback.
You get a sense of that on the screen.
Okay. So it's
Yes.
be fairly.
Zoom in on that, Ethan, it might be helpful.
Yeah,
I don't know if
I'm
you
gonna go to a section through.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. In looking right now, looking in front of the FedEx office, it looks to be about 8 to 9 to 10 feet. That's
Okay.
true with the sidewalk there.
Yeah, so inherently along Route 9, there's a slightly wider existing sidewalk, maybe in that 8 to 10 foot range. So we're saying that along Route 9, you're going to add another 5 feet to that. So you're going to be, in the 12 to 15 foot range.
Okay, great.
And on all the smaller neighborhood streets where you have like a 4 to 6 foot sidewalk, it's kind of haphazard. We're going to add another 5 feet, so you get closer to 8 to 10.
Okay, so you're actually,
So it won't be.
that's good. That's actually great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's a good point.
Janice,
Yeah, just to clarify, to go a little bit beyond what Linda's saying. So what is the separation between the property line and the sidewalk going to look like? Is there going to be like a vegetative barrier, or is there going to be?
good question.
Yes,
Yeah. Or is
because it's not, I think, going to be 12 or 13 feet of open. It's not going to, I
Could
think.
be.
It could be, but I mean, the way,
Depends on what the property owner wants to do with it.
right, well, that's all I'm saying. So that in fact, what Linda's saying could really be that the sidewalk still seems kind of narrow there.
We can say what.
We can say what we can, and indeed, what we're hearing is we ought to be saying what we want. Because, so if plantings, or do you want something that's completely open, that is a paved surface, so that the sidewalk you have the perception of a much wider space? It's a good question.
Ken has thoughts.
Well, so I want to respond to Mark and Carl's comment. The zoning is very clear on the requirements in terms of percentages and things like that. It also requires that they go through a site plan review process with the planning board. Gentlemen.
And the design advisory team.
And the design advisory team, and it has design guidelines. So rather than trying to say now what the future would be exactly, we have to have some level of flexibility using experts like yourself, Mark, like yourself. So, it's, that's inherent in the process. And so I think trying to say now that you want to define what's from the edge of the public right of way to the front of the building, or where all the curb cuts will be, or where the circulation will exactly lay out, or things like that. I think that needs to be accommodated, but that's where we need to rely on the planning board, design review teams, and the zoning board of appeals.
I think that's exactly what my point was, is that we don't know.
Yeah, well,
So, like,
point counterpoint.
And you ignorance? No.
No, point counterpoint is that, the other side of the street has no side. And it has a different kind of commercial experience.
Mhm.
So if what we do is create an urban zone on our side and activate more of that edge all the way along it with a wider area, then I think we have something different and something better than what's across the street. So, and they'll never change it across the street because they have that frontage road. So I'm for defining an urban vernacular, okay, for this site that's different. And if it means that we get 12 feet from the backside of the sidewalk and 5 feet of it is planted and the other part is, you know, a larger entryway to possibly, you know, commercial space that could be along there, I think that's a good idea.
Well, it's a good idea, but why wouldn't that fit in your role as the planning board member and site plan review? And then, by the way, I was also responding to your comment about designating a
If it's
park
not
area.
in the, if it's not with words and pictures or whatever, or guidelines or whatever, you can't make.
Well, by the time it gets to you,
Yeah, it's by the time it gets to me, it's too late, especially the planting. That's what gets cut mostly. But
So what do we want to ask?
That's
the
why I
second-
keep-
let-
that's
let's
why I
wrap-
keep
let's
talking
wrap
about
this up.
a
What do we
spot
want to
in
ask the
place.
second to do?
Hmm?
What do we want to ask these folks to do?
I think we should undercut the massing along the edge of, Boylston Street there, so that we can get 12 feet on the backside of, that's what
But that's,
and 5 feet of it could be a setback and the other 5 feet could be designated in specific areas where they want to put commercial space.
so you're not saying increase the overall setback, you're saying let the facade above the first floor
Yes,
be 5 feet back, but,
yes. Yeah.
okay.
And we've asked people to do that on the planning board before, and they have.
Yeah.
But I think in this case, since it's such a large development.
Yeah.
It would be better to have it written in stone, so that it's something that you could give up for something else,
Right.
but
Okay.
is required. Because
Alright.
it's always a struggle. A struggle back and forth, so to see what you can.
Okay, that's very helpful, very helpful. I appreciate that. That's why I was saying, what do we want these people to, you know, what's the upshot?
Like, can you talk about there's a 2% mitigation, offsite mitigation work, which then can be reduced to 125
Right.
for the select board. Why are we doing that?
So,
Go ahead.
so the, in versions 31 to the, whatever previous drafts of the zoning, we had just pulled the mitigation requirement that we had in every other special overlay zoning. But given what we know about this area and the level of need in terms of infrastructure improvements, for the Chestnut Hill area, we think it's warranted to increase that from the 1% of hard construction cost to 2%. But we realize that particularly for some of these larger scale developments, that's a very big number. And so, you know, and I think, yeah, so we just built in some flexibility in terms of, you know, it seemed as though the traffic impacts would be able to mitigate it and you would have to go up into the 2%. We just wanted to provide that flexibility.
So for that first block, will 2% be?
You mean the Chestnut Office Park?
Yeah.
Something on the order of $12 million.
Okay. And Northland is giving 6, I think. In addition to all the other things.
Yeah.
It's giving how much?
Hmm?
It's giving how much?
6.
So the $12 million, okay, I said earlier that in the comments I made, I didn't really, people tend to talk a lot about the fiscal impacts of this.
Well, that's an addition.
I know, I understand, but it's still money, okay, that the town would have. There are a lot of other fiscal benefits in the town. Honestly, I think the more important thing is what's going to be created. Because what the funds are going to be spent, okay? And whether they're one-time funds or an increase in taxes that helps on an ongoing basis, that's all great. But the important thing that we're trying to do with zoning is it seems to me, is trying to envision what we want to create in bricks and mortar there. The 2% will go into creating that more or less $12 million. It will go into creating some bricks and mortar along the lines really what Mark is talking about and other people have talked about. There's a lot of other fiscal benefits, financial benefits that actually fall out of this. Some other contributions that are made for immediate sidewalks, $400,000 for the sidewalks in the immediate area and so forth. So,
But that's part of
that's
sidewalk is
not part of the 2%. That's in addition to the 2%.
where is that?
Well, it's not. You haven't seen it yet because we're still working out details on an agreement with the.
So that would be.
That's
an
part of the
agreement.
MOA that.
So it's not in the zoning, it's not the 2%.
No, you're not going to specify how the 2% is spent in the zoning.
Well, we are specifying.
Well, okay, in broad.
It says,
Yeah.
pedestrian, bicycle, streetscape, improvements. Planning, designing, implementing any pedestrian, bicycle, streetscape or vehicular infrastructure.
Right, but we're not saying you have to do this or that. You're saying that here are the categories of expenditure that are appropriate. Right.
That was actually included in my slide deck, which had some other updates about that, so I don't know if we wanna,
Okay,
wrap up with Sasaki.
let's wrap up with this thing. But David, do you have comment?
Questions, just while we have this slide up here. I'm not clear on how you actually build those two gray pass-throughs between between the city realty development and the
two skinny
parcel
ones.
and the adjacent parcel, the parking lot, and then also mid-block in the rest of the 4.0. Like we're saying there has to be a pedestrian pass through, but it's multiple owners and everything. Like how do you do, what does that mean?
Sorry, I think that those, and Ethan can also jump in here, but I think the gray sections were sort of, like demonstrations of where there could be that, Boylston Heath Street connection and the points of porosity in the sub-districts. I don't think that we are, specifically stating like.
I know,
that
but
is
how
the
do
point
you
in which-
demand it anywhere?
Right.
If it doesn't, if you have all these different property owners and somebody has to build that.
Right, on the second block, how do you do that?
So we do have, that's a very good question. So the requirement for the Boylston and Heath Street connection applies to properties under common ownership that are between Boylston and Heath Street. So, between separate owners, we
Don't do it.
we
No, it's just somebody was
require.
building all along the Boylston side, but they didn't own the
Right.
Heath Street side. How do they deliver?
They're not, there's no.
They're not required to.
Okay, so only if you own all the way across, okay. There are just two other areas. One, I do want to ask about. The other, I just want to sort of put a pin in. The put a pin in is just looking, we just got the draft zoning, that has all the landscaped open space and everything. And so I wasn't able to think through, but there are a fair amount of, there's a lot of relief categories where, open space can just whatever, usable open space can be up on roofs and it's not really down where anybody can see it, and you can mitigate. There's a lot of, it's this much, but it could be a lesser percentage for a bunch of if you do this or that. And according to the planning, the zoning board can provide relief and everything. And I just think that all needs to be looked at carefully to see what the end result is. If all of that, is there still enough open space? So the other thing I wanted to get at is if you go to the, go back to the, porosity drawings for the 4.0. Yeah, that, okay. So I think this has all been, that's all been pretty thought through with the, it's called a through block porosity and the frontage ratio. The frontage ratio on the ground between 70 and 80% or whatever, and then a greater frontage ratio above. But then if we go, I was just puzzled as I was looking at these documents. No, go back to the next slide. On the neighborhood, no, go forward to the one of the whole prop, that, right. Okay, so for the neighborhood mixed use, those two blocks, I'm not understand, so you have to build to a 5-foot line off of the property line. You can't have a bigger setback or a lesser setback. So, and there's a very high, it's at least 80% of the frontage on all the way around all those blocks has to be a building. And so that's very different than what's there now, which is wood frame houses and this and that. And this is not overlay, this is a new zoning. So
it's over.
Okay, so it is overlay. I was getting mixed up in different committees and everything. So basically people can continue to reproduce what's there, but if they want to use the capacity of the overlay, they have to build to the urban wall and create an urban wall. And we haven't really spent any time in the last year and a half or 2 years or whatever it is talking. We also haven't really looked at carefully, kind of what those two blocks look like. I mean, we've dealt with the height and the envelope, but this is pretty clear saying that the vision is this 50 to 75 foot tall urban block with an urban wall all the way around. And in fact, it's sort of saying there can't be a lot of porosity.
Brooklyn Village.
Yeah. And so it's more, I was looking at how clearly that's designated here and just kind of scratching my head a little and saying, we haven't really had that conversation in much depth. And is that what's right for those two blocks?
So the objective is to encourage commercial development in particular across the study area, as opposed to replacing single-family homes or 2-family homes or three-family homes with the like. If somebody wants to do that, as you say, they can use the existing underlying zone. So we're not forbidding that.
Yeah, so is it the fact that it's so narrow on the easternmost block that it's really, because I mean, I don't think anybody would argue with developing commercial in the 3.0 or certainly on Boylston Street all the way along the NMU and the 3.0. We can have a conversation about Sheaf Street, but the two sides of Heath Street, like nobody's going to build a CVS on Heath Street opposite the school, the Baldwin School, or it's not, that's not a shopping street. So what is the commercial vision for that block? Because if it's about Boylston Street side, which again is still not much walkability and it doesn't have anything on the other side except tennis, even then, is it the same on both sides of that block? Do we treat Boylston and Heath on that easternmost block identically?
So okay, so the ground floor commercial, so there's like there are a couple different levers in terms of what we're doing to promote commercial development. But so the two big ones are the ground floor commercial requirement, where 60% of the frontage has to be commercial use. And then the other is a minimum amount of commercial square footage as part of your project overall proposal. So the NMU, all that we have applying there is the ground floor commercial requirement. However, we have exempted Heath Street in its entirety from that requirement. And I think in Sheaf Street is also exempt from that. And then we also built in some flexibility where there's the ability to waive the ground floor commercial requirement as you move towards the peripheries of the district, because it might just be harder for ground floor space to be successful as you get kind of farther from the core of the commercial area. So I think the vision with the neighborhood mixed use is that there would be ground floor commercial activation along Hammond Street and Boylston and those edges. And then the rest would be residential.
Okay, so that
With the
deals with
option to
it.
have
So that's a very helpful in terms of understanding what goes inside the box, the use expectations. But we're still asking from a massing standpoint.
Yeah.
To have Brookline Village along those two walls. And so I think we should just make sure that's what we want.
Can I make a comment about the commercial very quickly? We had a case in front of the planning board where 60% of the frontage needed to be commercial on Green Street. But the depth was only 12 feet.
So here it's 30 now.
So you're defining the depth as 30 minimum. Okay, I'm sorry I put it in, but I need to say that because it needs to be defined, otherwise you wind up with crazy space.
There's one other important lever that Meredith didn't mention, which is actually, I think it's the first lever in the zoning. It's in section 2A. And that is that you can only take advantage of this overlay with properties of at least half an acre.
Right.
So it's not like you can build a small scale townhouse or four-story building in the NMU district that is that small under this zoning. I mean, there's also.
Which means that then nothing would happen. I mean.
No, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that that if there's going to be commercial development beyond tower, and it's going to require someone to assemble.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
that doesn't mean it won't happen.
No, in that little lot, it won't happen.
And the little,
Yeah,
lot,
just assemble
that's
it.
correct.
But I think David has a really good point where I think that the two NMUs, in my point of view, there really are, especially the one on the east, there really are residential blocks because they're surrounded basically by the sort of residential.
They're split.
It's a little
Well,
commercial.
except
There's a little
for the corner.
A little of both.
Oh, XO.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
That stuff there.
And
Yeah, let me finish my point. Except for the corners of Hammond Street,
Yeah.
XO bar is an exception to, for
But it's
me.
commercial.
Yes, but for me, that's like the commercial that we don't want. It's like,
Why?
Oh, speak for yourself, dude.
but
Stand.
Hey, it's a good place to go get a drink.
but it's not. It's the commercial that sort of relies on the parking lot. It's like it's the non-urban
It's
commercial.
it's certainly not urban, no.
It's like the suburban commercial that we always talk about, like, oh my God, why do we have all this blacktop?
Yeah,
Because it doesn't survive without that. And I would actually prefer that blacktop become residential, another lot, another house there than what it is. There's a history of why those two lots are commercial, but if you look at them, both, even the old Starbucks, both could very well be residential buildings. The wine store looks like a residential building, and the other one
they were.
almost exactly. And the same thing for what let's forget this chief, the other NMU, it could be sort of a bunch of triple deckers and keep it that way, and it'd still be residential coming up from Boston Street, pretty much the same way that when you're walking from the park down here.
Yeah.
You have residential and then it turns into urban.
Yeah.
And then it could have commercial. So it's like a transition block. So we haven't, I don't think we've looked at it enough, but it is what it is.
Okay, so again, I'll ask you the same question as I asked with Mark, because this is a lab. Okay? What is it that we should be asking staff or Sasaki to do?
Well, since it is our last meeting.
Yeah.
I think staff and Sasaki should know what the committee thinks about this whole plan.
Mhm.
And I know that you said that there are no votes, although there are a lot of advisory committees that have votes, like the advisory committee and the planning board.
Yep.
So I would love to have a vote
Right.
of what we sort of think about this whole thing, because there's no more, even if it's just a straw vote.
So, I've been thinking about that. The advisory committee has a statutory requirement to give advice after all to town meeting. And the planning board similarly. So I'm not sure whether the planning board is required to give its advice to the select board, I presume.
No, it's
ZBA.
zoning.
Zoning board.
Zoning board, ZBA, beg your pardon. So we don't have that.
Fine, but I think-
Hold on, hang on, just a sec. I'm trying to answer your question because I don't know if there's gonna be a satisfactory answer. We also have, sitting here at least, and we have two online, two people.
Yes, two people online.
Okay, so we have a quorum, but a bare quorum. Okay. So what I was gonna suggest is, I wonder if I could ask everybody for that straw vote by email, and I promise I will put it together in a coherent way and make it,
Well,
make it available somehow. I'm not
we
sure
have a
how-
quorum. I think what's important here, and actually, the people who are here and online are the ones who have been here and online the whole.
True, yeah,
The ones who haven't been here, they haven't been here.
yeah,
But I think this is gonna go to town meeting.
Yeah.
And at one point, it's gonna say, well, the committee that worked on this for a year.
Yeah.
Came up with this. Which assumes that the committee, which assumes that whatever they came up with, they agree with.
no.
My
it would-
messaging would be, this was a staff-led
Right, but-
community advisory.
But this is the
group,
first
staff
time we've
input.
ever done something like this.
Okay,
So I think it's just important for the process.
Yeah.
To say, half the committee agrees with this, a whole committee agrees with this, no one agrees with this. Just
But so agrees with what?
with that slide,
Okay.
with the other slide,
Um,
with the
But it's-
heights,
but we've
with the
also-
density, with,
right, but we've also got, this is a draft, it's not the
Right.
way it's gonna be submitted. Are we asking to do this before we have something concrete to say?
I think the diagram with the massing.
Yeah.
It's pretty good to show what we're proposing. Everything else is
So
just,
do you wanna go back and have a straw vote on just that, or?
yeah, I mean, it's the density, right,
so
the heights.
okay, the plan, and this is all on my slide deck. Just pull up my slide deck and we could move through it, but I did have an overview of sort of, between now and the filing deadline, here are the upcoming meetings.
Yeah, maybe we could
And-
do that and come back to your point.
But I think your concern, Carlos, is that you want to make sure that the attitudes of the community advisory group membership are fairly represented to the select board in staff's presentation of this proposal. You don't want to make it seem like there's an implication.
And to town
that-
meeting.
And to town meeting.
I don't care about
Absolutely.
the select board, it's tough.
Well, sure. So I mean, staff is going to be,
We're both shocked.
staff is,
And I have to say, I ran for select board with, this was one of my biggest emphasis.
Yeah.
And I will say that commercial development was one of my biggest emphasis, but this is too big for me.
Yeah, okay,
And so I'm not comfortable just,
Yeah. got it. Well, let's then take the time to go through your deck,
okay, Carlos.
because I think we probably exhausted what
Carlos
we're
hand
going
is-
to do in Sasaki.
oh, Carlos had something.
Carl?
Yeah, I was just going to support what Carlos is saying and also add that once this is discussed in various committees, like advisory or and even coming before town meeting, the natural question is going to be, well, how do the citizens advisory group feel about this proposal? And if the answer is, well, they never voted on it, the next question might be, well, then basically, what did they do? So I think there's logic in having at least And if you don't want to do it now because everything is in draft, then maybe have one more meeting when there's a final draft and have the vote then. But I do think it's important, even if it's just a straw poll.
Okay.
So that let members of the public know what the citizens group that's met for how many months and spent how many hours, how their responses. Thank you.
By the time it gets to town meeting, it will be over 2 years.
That's
So, let's acknowledge, as Mike did at the beginning, let's acknowledge all of that work. The challenge that Mike has raised, and I think rightly so, is that, all of these things come together as a piece, right? So if we're just, for example, looking at that massing diagram and we're not considering the open space portions of it or the usable open space, the parking requirements, all of those things are both still in draft form and all have an impact, because one of the things that at least I've learned through this process is that we are balancing a number of trade-offs, and massing is certainly one of them, but it's not the only thing. And it extends as far to, the agreements that we are bringing to town meeting in the form of the authorizations for the select board for the MOA and the tax certainty agreement, et cetera. So ultimately, of course, town meeting will vote on all those things. However, to your point, having an understanding of what this community advisory group feels about the various aspects would certainly be useful. I can speak for myself, to the select board and ultimately to town meeting and also to the other boards. The challenge with a vote is that, first of all, you have to clearly establish what you're voting on, and you have to be able to communicate what you're voting on to the people who are going to have to interpret that vote. So if we're just looking at a massing diagram, then you have to say, it doesn't include the open space or all the other aspects of the zoning, which I don't think is what would be most helpful. But I do think Mike's suggestion of a narrative composite of what the various community advisory group members feel about the various aspects would be helpful. And, their perspectives coming from either their areas of expertise or their points. So we can structure that. It would actually be helpful to the process. I just don't think a straw vote would be helpful to the process because of the constraints of
But I think, Michael, I think you're missing one point, which is for some people, the scale of this project that has been proposed, not the project, the zoning, the scale of the zoning is way off, by a factor of whatever.
I understand.
And it doesn't matter what the open space, parking, all that other stuff, because they'll never bring it into the scale or the factor that those people are comfortable.
I understand that.
So
Right, so what, I want to interrupt because we're debating something. First of all, we're not gonna get a resolution of right now, but I'm gonna give you an example, Carlos. I chaired the Center Street Study Committee, and we put together, with the help of a consultant, a very thorough and I think really very interesting report on what the potential is for a particular approach to Center Street. There were 3 of the dozen or so members who, 2 of them had one set of opinions and another one had not exactly a minority view, but somewhat different view. And I said to, we had staff support and planning, and I said, those minority reports have to go with the majority report. They have to be very clearly, they have to accompany everything that we say that we have worked on, so that it's clear that there isn't unanimity, that there are other views of what to do with that lot, some of which are, well, the 2 are really quite radically different from what's being proposed. All I can tell you is I would do exactly the same thing if I get However, if we have 12 members, if I get 12 opinions back, or if I get 5 opinions back or whatever, do exactly the same thing and make sure that what we said to the select board and said to town meeting was reflective of the spectrum. I can promise you that.
Right, that's a lot of thinking. I mean, when Mark and I were at the Lower Boylston Street Committee, we had regular votes every other meeting.
Right.
And towards the end of, I think it was the last meeting, there was a vote saying, should we bring this to town meeting or not, or should we?
Right.
And, you know, the draft wasn't complete. The zoning wasn't as precise as this. And yet we voted. And Mark and I voted yes, everybody else voted no.
Right.
So I think the committee has a very good understanding of what we're proposing.
Staff's proposing, the staff proposal.
Okay.
We're not
so-
coming from you.
So that makes my point. Actually, that makes my point. I won't say anything.
And that is indeed the point of not having to report about voting, but okay.
So
Good.
then we
What-
shouldn't be worried about voting then, if we don't count at all.
Well, expressing an opinion that can be put into a summary is, it may not constitute what you consider to be a vote, but it will have weight.
So,
But regardless,
Sorry, Janice, Mark was first, and then,
Okay.
then you're next. Yeah,
Okay.
Mark.
well,
But so again, this is, we're going down a rabbit hole here, and there are people who I want to ask questions about
And
what
I'm
their
missing my
understanding
Sugar
is
Hill
of
meeting, so.
this part and of the design guidelines, and I'd like to see Meredith's. So one last comment, and then we're gonna move on.
Why can't you let them, I think Carlos brought the good, don't you, you don't want to hear what they have to say.
I do, I
You
said
probably
one last
will.
comment, and then let's go.
my comment?
Yours and Janice's, and then we're gonna move on.
Okay. Okay, I
And thank you for your advice, Blair.
I think, well, I was involved in the other committee with Carlos, the Boylston Street Corridor Committee. And I was really upset over the fact that it wasn't brought to town meeting.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. And I would be very upset about this also if it wasn't brought to town meeting. Regardless of what the community right now is concerned with in terms of the height and so forth. So I would vote yes on this.
Right.
And the reason why is because the town needs to do this. Because what else are we gonna do? And in addition to that, that's what we should have done with the Boylston Street Corridor study. What else were we gonna do over there? We stopped and, you know, I don't wanna cause a problem here, but the committee was asked to do exactly what you just said, write an opinion and blah, 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 what you think. I've never seen that. I never saw it and it never went anywhere. And as a matter of fact, it never was presented to town meeting. And as far as I'm concerned, I thought it was actually better stuff and a better outcome than we have here. But I'm willing to go ahead with this because I think that it has merit. And the reality is let the people decide. Let town meeting decide.
Absolutely, that's what's gonna happen one way or the
So,
other.
I mean, you know, let's go ahead with it.
All right, Yeah.
Even though I keep complaining about things,
yes, you do.
I'm definitely for it.
Okay, thank you. Well, if you and Carlos would both like to say what you'd like to say, I promise to you that it won't get buried. It will go to the people who need to hear it, which is Select Board, Advisory Committee, town meeting. Janice.
So Mike, I really appreciate your comment before about wanting town meeting to hear from the whole complexity of opinions and ideas. But I want to push back a little bit on your comparison to the Center Street project to this.
Oh, I wasn't making a comparison in the project at all. I was talking about the process of reporting.
So even that though, but that's a more organic process. And this started out as an organic process. And then it changed once the developer got in. And I believe that had it stayed an organic process, we would have had upzoning because we know we want this area to be developed. And I think that what would have come to town meeting from an organic standpoint, I think would have been probably 8 to 10 stories, would have come out of the process, out of an organic process. And the fact that the developer came in and really I counted up the number of meetings that we have spent looking at that proposal as opposed to doing what we were supposed to do, which is exactly what you're talking about now, the zoning. I think that that it didn't really allow for the process to evolve and create something, I think a much better outcome for the town, for the community, for everybody involved, because there would have been real buy-in from everybody. As it is now, it'll never reach that, because you're negotiating with the developer and you're tailoring it to one developer, which may or may not serve the needs of other developers in the area. We don't know. If we had a more organic process where we would have really had other developers come to the table too, and we could sit down and talk about the broader needs in the commercial area, because it's more than this 5 acres. It's a much bigger area. I think that we would have actually ended up with a much more congenial and really effective outcome than what's going to happen. I think now. I'm not going to prejudge. I have not seen the final product. You're still working on it, staff. But I will look at it with some skepticism that it's been tailored really to meet the needs of a particular developer, when really what we were supposed to do was to look at, to have this broader conversation within the commercial area. And I feel very sorry that we didn't have that opportunity to do. And to be fair, I knew from the get-go that this was advisory, that it wasn't going to be the way others were, that there wasn't going to, it was made very clear to me that this was going to be a different approach.
One of the reasons that this was structured the way it was because the Lower Wall Street project didn't go anywhere. So, okay, let's set that aside. Now, go ahead, Meredith, and what is the next? Give us the next steps.
No,
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll move through this very quickly. Overview of the broader study objectives. We're all pretty familiar with that at this point. This is very tiny type, but this is a summary of sort of the strategies that we are using in pursuit of advancing those objectives. This is the diagram sort of representing the key components of the Chestnut Hill commercial area study, which we're all familiar with at this point. But I did want to give you an update on sort of where we're at in terms of level of completion for each of, developing the recommendations and policy, as well as the deliverables. So I'd say we are in the home stretch with the zoning and the design guidelines. There's still additional work to do. I think we've received a lot of very helpful feedback. And then the context of this discussion, and it's my intention to follow up with some individual community advisory group members for additional input as we continue to put finishing touches on. And then the transportation infrastructure upgrades, when was that? It was last week. The Transportation Board adopted the Chestnut Hill commercial area transportation study, sort of the scope of the recommendations as a planning document. So this is just a helpful point of reference to.
What does it mean?
So it's sort of like a transportation board endorsed scope of work relative to this particular area. So it allows staff, like a lot of the things that we talked about from that with the ARC proposal, these are things that are going to require a lot of additional work, thought, analysis, and public process. So I think it's sort of, we're going to continue refining those ideas, but we're not fully committed to them. It's just sort of, we're going to continue to refine what's in there.
And did they have any comments about when the study was done?
You're talking about when the traffic
Right.
data was gathered? So that question was addressed by the consultants, combination of using other traffic data that we talked about. Kit doesn't answer the question in the context of this meeting. But I can certainly follow up with you at the key points of that. Commercial area vibrancy enhancements, pretty straightforward. We know we're going to be recommending in terms of that. Town protection, so this speaks to the draft MOA. So we're going back to the select board with an update on the progress in that negotiation at tomorrow night's executive session. And, the goal is that we'll have a good document and scope of benefits to present alongside a zoning proposal if the select board gives us the direction to move forward with that. So the report itself is sort of buffering as we wait to finalize these other components that can roll them up into one reference document summarizing the study recommendations. So a couple of key highlights with the where we're at in terms of the zoning and what's included in the most recent version. We also had a very helpful conversation with the building department today. I got some additional feedback from town council. So there is probably going to be another draft I'll circulate next week that's going to reflect some of our input and edits from that. So this is a lot of text, but it just sort of itemizing the key changes that Sasaki has already walked us through in terms of the visuals for the zoning envelope. So we reduced the proposed maximum heights in the 3 and transit-oriented sub-districts from like 10 to 12 to 7 stories. Simplified the setback requirements, particularly in the 4 sub-district. Step back requirements, we modified those to sort of be more tailored to the changes in proposed heights in the other sub-districts. Added that 50-foot step back with a max 7 stories to help with the transitioning to the other sub-districts. And we're continuing to work on refining that frontage ratio concept, which I think is certainly improved since we presented it before, but it needs some refining. And then refined ground floor commercial requirements. We sort of touched upon that in response to some of the issues that you brought up this evening. We also added language under the where we're talking about the minimum commercial requirements, sort of protecting that once that commercial square footage is added to the tax base and the commercial area through this overlay zoning, that it's there for the duration of the life of the building. So we're trying to lock in the value of that. And then another point which Ken had touched base about at the start of the meeting is, FAR still applies to the 4.0 as we have been looking at the other sub-districts and trying to do some potential development scenarios. We've just found that the FAR requirement has not been that useful. And we were talking about FAR before we had really gotten to setbacks and step backs. And particularly since, the 3.0 district, which we're going to have to rename if we decide to sort of abandon the max FAR concept, as well as the neighborhood mixed use, where they're, more block scale potential development, narrower, more development constraints. And it just, at this point, and the EDAP subcommittee is going to be meeting on Friday. And so I'd like the EDAP subcommittee's feedback on this, but it just seems that in continuing to have the FAR, in addition to all of the other zoning requirements that we have for those sub-districts, there's just a greater likelihood that we could miss the mark and be like, 0.5 FAR from supporting real redevelopment potential. So as long as it's within the setbacks, step backs, and height that we are comfortable with for these sub-districts, that might be sufficient. So that's under consideration.
And the open space.
And the open space requirements and all of the other things that we've layered into the zoning. And then we also are reevaluating the record grade by sub-district. Just a little bit into the weeds, but before we establish the point at which you measure the height from a very specific point at each of the different sub-districts. And we have abandoned that and feel like that is kind of clunky and not particularly helpful. So we are working on refining that language. And then overview of other key zoning changes. So with the transit-oriented sub-district, sort of that's coming into clearer focus. And we did add the 10% lot area minimum open space requirement for the TOM. And we already talked about how we'd increase the amount of mitigation funding required for multimodal improvements and then refined the NMU. And this was something that was under consideration, but Carla had made a comment back in the previous meeting about, really, have we looked at additional opportunities to create more affordable housing? And I apologize Carla, if I mischaracterized that, but that's kind of what I had taken from it. So for the NMU, sorry, I'll flip ahead to this one. So this is an overview of what we were talking about before. You've got the minimum commercial square footage requirement and where it applies to the different sub-districts, the minimum ground floor commercial requirement, where it applies. We've exempted Heath, Sheaf, and Dunster. And then the places where Carlos had kind of given us the summary at the top of the meeting. So in terms of bonus height, there are 2 opportunities for that in the different sub-districts. So it's in the 4.0. If you get more than 60% commercial square footage, you can do 14 stories. And then in the neighborhood mixed use, the standard is maximum of 4 stories, but you can go up to 6 stories and kind of come up to the existing height precedent that's been established by the 118040B and what's proposed at Heath and Sheaf. If your project has a minimum of 50% on-site affordable units, this is kind of riffing off of one of the recommendations that emerged from the Affordable Housing Overlay District Committee work. And so they had done a lot of analysis with RKG as well, and felt like, either 50% affordable, 50% market rate might be feasible, or they also thought 100% affordable might be possible within a 5 to 7 story range. So I think we're piloting that a variation of that recommendation as the incentive for the neighborhood use.
But they had recommended 52% mixed, right? Or
52. I thought it was
no, it
100%.
was not 50-50. They said that I think it was 48 affordable and 52, otherwise it didn't work out. But someone
I
correct.
can go back and double check. That would be very important detail for those. If it is them.
The overlay.
The Affordable Housing Overlay District.
Okay, so we will go back and double check that. I think in early February, we're gonna go and present to the HAB and get some feedback on this as well. And then the other alternative in the neighborhood mixed use for 7 stories is if you're proposing a hotel. Okay, and then here's an overview of this is an excerpt from the zoning document summarizing maximum building height by sub-district. And then I added at the top here, just as a quick reference, here's what the existing zoning allows in terms of maximum heights.
Sorry, I want to go back to a question Carla asked
Yes.
about the sense that a story would represent 10 feet, or 10 feet represent 1 story of height. The ground floor is typically, if you want commercial space, 15 feet, because you need HVAC and so forth above, particularly if it's going to be for restaurants. There needs to be plenty of room for the mechanicals. And then the same is true to some extent for the floors above. There needs to be more space than we think of, say, in a typical suburban house with an 8-foot ceiling.
I
You
think
said a
it's
minimum of 10 and
10 and a half.
And so, so the minimum is 10 and a half, and that, when you add that up, you're getting up towards that 85, 88 foot.
And then our feedback in terms of marketability was more like 11
or 12.
11, yeah, for residential.
It turns out that if you take 1 floor at 15 and 6 floors at 12, it works out to 87.
So Carla, that doesn't mean 12-foot ceilings. That means 12 feet between floors.
Slabs.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, speaking of mechanical.
Yeah.
And restaurants. One of the reasons why Brookline Place, the restaurant hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
Is because the first tenant in that location has to do the lining through the shaft all the way to the top. And that's like $1 million to do.
You mean preventing?
Right, because the developer did not provide venting, provided the shaft, but not the venting. Which is typical, unless you have a MOU, which said that
if you provide the shaft, how do you not provide the venting?
because you need the shaft is just a wall space, like a hole through the
Oh, you have to
ground.
line the shaft up.
Then you have to put the equipment in the shaft to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually on the roof.
No, it's all the way from the kitchen to the roof.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
So, and that's one of the reasons why they haven't done it is because the first person who goes in there has to spend a lot of money doing it.
Yes.
Is there, in order to avoid that happening in the future, is there any thought of that being part, if we really do want restaurants, that being part of the developer cost rather than the tenant's cost?
So another thing with the ground floor commercial requirement, it also means that those areas are eligible for the ground floor commercial incentive, which is an initiative to try to get the developers to finish out the ground or the commercial space, so that if you could get a tenant in there faster, and then in exchange for that, they can have higher levels of AMI above that. In the ground floor commercial incentive, there's the restaurant ready.
Restaurant ready requirement, so
Yeah.
black iron to your point, I'm not sure that. What level of specificity that you're talking about in terms of the actual ventilation requirement, but that would be the idea is that it also then, if the first tenant happened to be a retail shop, but a subsequent tenant was a restaurant, then it would accommodate that. So that's built into the ground floor commercial incentive.
So are you saying, Carlos, you would want that built into zoning?
Well, it didn't work out to Brookline Place. That's one of the reasons I've been told there's no tenant in that first floor.
What was, so was
Because
it in the zone?
the initial investment is so high
Yeah.
that
But it's not in the zoning, it was not in their zoning or their MOA.
it seems like it was left out, which was, according to some EDF members, mistake.
Oh, okay, well, that's.
So the requirement in the zoning was that there's a restaurant.
Right.
So the landlord knew that that was the requirement, and if they failed to plan for that, then I'm not sure that's, I'm not sure that's a flaw with the town's regulatory,
All right, that's a very apt point, thank you.
but it's a good point.
So, as I said, it's still a state of flux here. That's very interesting. Go ahead.
So then this is just an overview of upcoming meetings, as we make our way towards the February 25th Springtown meeting warrant article filing deadline at noon. But we will be giving presentations to EDAB, the planning board, tentatively going to the Housing Advisory Board at their meeting in February, with the goal of presenting the study recommendations to the select board on February 3rd. We will be asking for select board's direction and how to move forward with this. So.
And then beyond that, once the zoning article is submitted, you have the usual I'm sure the planning board will weigh in on it, the advisory committee will weigh on it, EDAB will weigh on it, the housing advisory board will weigh in on it, the select board will weigh in on it. Maybe other, and the select board will certainly weigh in on it, usually after all the others, and I'm not sure who else, maybe the bicycle advisory committee will weigh on it.
Transportation board.
Who knows, transportation board. Anyway, any committee that wants to weigh on it, okay, there you go. You know, there'll be a report. There'll be a big thick report, and at each one of those reports, there will be a vote of that body, having listened to whoever is presenting and listening to members of the public. So there's plenty of public process to go.
But they'll never know what the committee thought.
But they'll never know what you thought, because I'm not going to say that. Of course you will. They'll know what you said. All right. And in any case, you'll be able to say it. Okay.
And then it is, of course, also worth saying that should this pass town meeting, as we mentioned before, is a design advisory process for any large project goes through. There's a planning board process. There is a zoning board, a special permit application, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And it's not the end in that regard.
All right. So the last bit of this is public comment. And so one of the complaints about public comment is that people have had 3 minutes to talk and we haven't had any discussion. So I'm perfectly happy to sit here and have some discussion if we can. The one thing I would suggest, however, is that I think Ken put it very well when there was a a complaint that, well, there's been no not adequate consultation with the public. We've heard a lot. And some of us at least disagree with the comments. And so we have to agree to disagree, I'm afraid, about height. On everything else, design guidelines, some of the discussion about setbacks and so forth, I'd really be very happy to have comments, questions, whatever. And if you want to speak about height, that's fine. But honestly, the more productive discussion could be about everything else.
That's right.
That's not surprising, but
Yeah, this is the problem from day one, as
Yeah.
Deanna said, right? You're telling us what we can and can't say and what we should and shouldn't think
no,
about things.
no, excuse me,
no,
excuse me.
Right,
but-
it's,
Right,
but you're
right.
implying that, and so it's
No,
just,
that's not
that's,
true. You've already said those things, and we've
yeah,
heard
and
them
we
to
can say them
disagree.
again,
Yeah, and
so you don't need to preface it.
okay. Well, what is then, in any case, are there any questions about the guidelines? Blair, in particular, you have some expertise in this.
I'm-
And mine as well.
I want to just start with something you said, Mike.
Yeah.
Stanley, which was that we want to envision what we want to create.
Yeah.
And we could not agree more with that. I would like the, if Sasaki could put up the one that had the photo images of the different buildings.
Are they still here?
I thought they did a really excellent presentation, and I read through some of the guidelines and I thought they were very good. So is it possible for,
You
Sasaki
haven't,
to put
you haven't.
the one that had all the
abandoned.
various photographs that showed the kind of urban design characteristics that you're,
So the
Guidelines.
enlivened
Guidelines.
streetscape render.
not the building rendering, but the photographs.
Yeah.
Wow.
One that showed the activated
Yeah.
public ground.
Yeah, the ones with the photographs, yeah. Yeah, no, there's another one that has a before, one more before, that one.
Yeah.
This,
So, okay, thank you. So, I thought that your presentation actually made an excellent point of just to the contrary in terms of what a kind of more livable, more appropriate development is. And these are 6, 7 stories, maybe they're 8. But I think that the height of 14, I think and with Boylston Street here, I think you're really looking at a development that would be similar to down at the Landmark Center where Boylston Street from Park Avenue, Park Drive goes down towards the Fenway. I mean, I think those buildings there, I haven't counted them, but I bet there are 12 stories, 14 stories, and maybe the one that's on the corner, which is really rather dramatic. I don't know what that is, 16 or 18. I mean, I know we started.
Oh,
there.
the glass one with
Okay.
sculpture in front.
Yeah, right, that one. I think that's
tall.
That's
right, but I only bring that
25
up because I think the question that the town is gonna need to face, and we may not win this one. I would like this to get redeveloped. I really think that height is gonna look crazy in this location. Because there's nothing close to that height around. It's very urban. I think this level of urban, that's 7 stories, maybe even a 10-story building, I think that could work in terms of the space. It's still gonna stick out, but I think that would be more suitable for this neighborhood. And I think the neighborhood has been involved. We, notwithstanding what they've said in the Brookline News, we're not against development here. And I've been urging people to accept much higher than people prefer. Just think you're a little bit too high here. And I think the diagrams that you were showing where you had like Tully Street, you show the height of the buildings on each side, I think make that point. The one along the edge of Heath Street, and yes, it's stepped back. I think that's good design. It's just a little bit too high. I think if it was shaved down a little bit, you're not gonna have us, you won't have me at least objecting to it. I just think you're a little bit too high here, and that's what I have to say. Okay.
thanks.
Yeah, so I would echo some of what Blair and Janice and Carlos have said.
it was very helpful to hear you raise the question, what do we want created here? And I totally agree that this has gotten completely derailed. And unfortunately, because to say it again, the neighborhood is behind upzoning. The neighborhood is behind commercial development. The neighborhood is behind more housing. These pictures at this like 6, 8, even 10-foot height could work. But you've been dazzled by a golden egg that is beyond what would be conducive to the neighborhood. And it's been really disappointing how hard that has been. And it's not about all the details that, yes, have been tweaked with the design. Nope. You're missing the point with all of those things. Nice, yeah, okay, nope. Too big, too much, and it's unfortunate. And I hope there is an honest minority report in all of the presentations that you do about the objections to this.
We don't know that it's a minority though, because we
don't, you're right.
We don't actually know that.
You're absolutely right.
So
good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I actually hope, someone brought up the point that there could potentially be one more meeting where there was, it doesn't even maybe have to be for discussion, but a presentation of the final draft, because I think that was brought up in the context of a vote. But if this is indeed the last meeting, I think it's probably at least in this forum, our last opportunity to say some things about the process. I think it's really unfortunate that we're sitting here this close to where you're going to put a warrant deadline forward, and we're finally hearing conversations about the NMU site, and you're still working out details that seem to me should have been worked out a very long time ago. And that really comes from this emphasis you've had on the office park site from day one. And that really derailed everything, because it came in with a 20-story building, and we had to fight. We spent so much time fighting back on something when we could have had an organic process, something that started with the focus on the zoning. What do we want? What do we want to envision and create? Have a zoning that fits the neighborhood, that fits the needs of the town, that really made a place, something like this, that we would all be really, happy to have. And I think the process from day one set up a very, despite the fact that we're on board, it has felt one that it didn't progress. Like, again, we're sitting here listening to now about things at the NMU site. We've heard nothing about what the other developer may or may not want. We've heard nothing at any of these meetings. The town spent, I don't know how much money with consultants, RKG, and there was a report that over a year ago, we were all 100% behind, and that vanished, right? Completely into thin air. We've never heard from that again. So I think just process here has been really disappointing and frustrating. As someone who, I've lived in Brookline now, this is our 14th year owning a home. We've lived here 21 years. Our children have gone to school here. This has been probably my first really close, in-depth look at how things unfold and how things happen. And I'm walking away really kind of disappointed in the process. I think it has not seemed like a collaborative one because of the way it was set up from day one. I think the running of the committee has been very biased from day one. And so I think that's what I'm leaving this with, which is really unfortunate. I hope that there is an opportunity. I think it's sort of striking to me that there was a long list of all the people who are going to get to weigh in and make a report this big, and somehow this committee doesn't seem to have a place to have a report. And for the folks who have put in a huge amount of time and their expertise, because they all come with that. And so I hope that is an opportunity that they are included in that, and that those voices are heard as well. Because I think just because this is a one-off, just because it's never been done this way before, I don't understand. That doesn't mean that you can't still do it, right? I'm an academic, and I sit in a lot of academic meetings, and if anyone's ever been in them, they're slow, they're painful. But the value in that slow, painful part of it, those pieces, is that all the voices are heard and all the voices are represented. And I feel like this committee and the members of this committee deserve that for the work that they've put in. So I'm gonna say.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mike, I'd like to make one final, I have one final concern. In looking at the list of all the different committees that are gonna be, this is gonna be presented to you. How are you going to separate out zoning, which is what we're voting on, from the project, which has all these golden carrots dangling from it? And
It's a good question.
no, because I mean,
Okay.
Brookline.news has done a terrible job of actually of conflating the two.
So
I mean, that's all it talks about is the project.
it's a good question, and I tried to get at that when I said with zoning, we're trying to envision a commercial and a retail in particular, is my view, very interested in ground floor, a retail community that will be beneficial to the town as a whole and to the neighborhood. And it's the zoning that has to do that. Has to carry that burden, and if the zoning doesn't encourage that, then we haven't set the right.
But the zoning really was crafted to enable as a project.
Well, on one part of the overall study area, I think it's fair to say that it certainly influenced the way the zoning is put together. But a long time ago, somebody said to me, there was a particular developer. He built a building at the corner of Beacon Street and St. Paul that is now, I think, a condo building on the southwest corner of Beacon and St.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And he built that thing right up to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Okay, there's just no. And somebody said to me, wherever that developer has been, he's found a way around the zoning so that we then had to constrain zoning further until the point where we finally got it to the point that he left town. Right? So there's two sides to the proposal influencing the zoning. Yes, the proposal has influenced the zoning from the perspective of the developer making a case for the economically feasible height that he needs versus, well, let's not have a solid wall along East Street. Let's not have traffic there coming out onto Heath. Let's not have surface parking. So here are a whole bunch of constraints that you have to live with. And of course, the response is, well, therefore we need this height. So,
but Mike, that was all,
let me
that
finish.
was all in response to a project.
Yeah, I know. That was, but that was our
zoning.
Pardon me?
It was in response to a project.
Yeah, it was, absolutely.
Well,
That's what I'm
I
saying.
hate to shoot it.
We've tried very hard to look at the project as somebody is presenting it and construct zoning that gives us what I really think we want, which is that commercially viable retail ground floor space. And that's the best. It's true that we have the proposal in front of us.
But maybe if we'd created the zoning that was the vision for the neighborhood first,
right,
the right developer would have come in to make it possible.
Yes, I have to push back on this.
Yeah,
To Brookline Place, Hilton Garden Inn.
Yeah.
Cleveland Circle AC
Yeah.
Marriott, Waldo Durgan, and the Walnut High site owned by the Brookline Housing Authority, all had developer at the table or part of the process when we worked on these things. They all included memorandum of agreement and additional zoning and tax certainty agreements. So there are packages of rights that you can and benefits you can negotiate that are part of that process. And I think those worked out generally very favorable to the town. So it's not something that's happened in a vacuum. This has happened many times. And I bet you and I know and others, David and Mark, we've all sat on other committees that have gone through this process. The only one I can think of that you're talking about that's a little bit more urban planning, urban design, followed by the developer was the Homestead Suites, the Davis Path project, which had some
Yes.
failed attempts at medical office, and then eventually we
And they have
upzoned
the
it.
sky plane zoning.
And we upzoned it, and the sky plane zoning that Steve Hyken and Sergio Lodigliani helped craft, who were on that committee. So I would just push back a little bit, saying our reality in the town has been generally favorable when a developer who has some, brings some realistic economic parameters to the table, that can also help.
Oh, I need to push back on that.
All right, I'm ready to.
Because first of all, Walter Durgan. And I was on the DAT for that one, and again, with the DATs, I enjoy being on them when the planning board has put me on them. But there are set parameters, like, and they always say, we're here now, we're not changing that much. So that's why you want to change things before you get to that point. But this was different because all the ones you've mentioned were single site lots, projects. This was a swath of town.
Right.
If we had just said, okay, we're gonna do, this is a single site, a single owner.
No, the
no,
Chestnut Hill commercial area.
Oh,
The Chestnut Hill
It's a broad area.
But that's not what the developer's talking about.
No, that's what we're talking
Well,
about.
I know.
the ones you, the examples you gave were a single lot, single developer, opportunity.
Right.
For zoning or upzoning.
Emerald Island wasn't a single site. Emerald Island had the gas station redevelopment that turned into Hilton Garden Inn. And then the rest of the site to the north.
Right.
Or the rest of the district to the north was upzoned. It hasn't been redeveloped because frankly, it's a real challenge with the lot size, but. So it's been a mix. It hasn't been all one thing or the other.
Yes, although Emerald Island is much smaller than this thing. I think the. I mean, the challenge is that there are a lot of mixed. So we have residential and commercial, and we wanted to do a lot of things with it. A lot of different, Emerald Island has the uniqueness of being an island, literally in the middle of nowhere. So we threw everything. We thrown micro units. We thrown everything possible in there. Nothing's happened other than the hotel, which tells you something about it. Maybe it's
Because the lots are too small to make
and
the
the
numbers work.
and the
That
flood
was
zone.
actually, the Emerald is a really good analogy for the part of the
Oh, the other.
neighborhood mixed use district.
Right.
And the point that you made earlier about, well, nothing's gonna happen there because the lots are too small, well, that's exactly the issue with Emerald.
Right.
And if anything ever does happen there, it's because some
And
party
that's
will
what's gonna
consolidate those lots.
And that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
They're
it
gonna
is in Emerald
consolidate.
Island, apparently.
Right.
yeah.
But I think what's interesting here, is, so this is one edge of town. It's sort of a large lot, it's a pretty large site.
Mhm.
And it's
Are we talking about the site or the whole study area?
the study area. It's a
Okay.
pretty large study area, and we probably all agree that it's not on the highest use.
Mhm.
That there has been, which is compared to other places, that may not be the case, but in this case, we could do a lot there. Now, and one of the comments that was interesting is that when we started this, RJK was doing this, we were looking at sort of RKG. We were looking at like 8, 6, 7, somewhere on there. And we had the site visit and it was just like, okay, this is sort of like that we're having that scale. And then the scale jumped. My question is, why aren't we doing 20? If, like what happened to that 20 if nothing, we were told at one point that nothing will work if it's not 20. Now it turns out that it's actually can be less. But I digress on that one. What I mean is, I think the scale is just not appropriate for that part of town. Because it's more of a.
But are you talking
scale-
about the whole study area?
Most of it. I mean, I like the way that it's turned out where we go back to 7.
Yeah.
But anything other than 7, 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I think it's just not
So
appropriate.
you're just subjecting to the 4.0 area.
The
because
3 and
everything else,
The 3 and the,
no,
Well, the
the
3
3
is
is.
now changed.
okay, the 3 is now changed and the other side has changed too.
Yeah.
The
So you're really
Um,
talking about the 4.0.
And And, you think about, like, travel around the country, travel around the areas, you go see what Northland has been doing, what they're proposing there, you go see, and there's just nothing being proposed outside of a big urban scale. I mean, urban place that is of this size, that makes sense. Because if we're going to apply this to the rest of Brookline, which is, again, something that we've said, then we're changing the scale of Brookline in a way that I don't agree with. So that's where my problem is. It's like if we were like saying, okay, let's do 7 the whole way through. It's like, well, that's about the scale of the rest of Brookline.
So do you think that that's, so now let's come back to the dollars and cents. Do you think, I mean, you're familiar enough with construction costs. Do you think that that's feasible economically?
Well, I mean, look at, again, Northland is 6, 7, 6.
Yeah.
It's a bigger lot, but they got good financing, $200 million.
Yeah.
And it's a good developer. They're going to manage to do that thing.
But
Yeah.
what is it? Is it primarily residential, primarily commercial? What is it?
It's going to be the same as 3.0. I mean,
Isn't this the project where like they had a lot more commercial and then they came back
It's
to the city and were like, we can't make it work, and so now like there's a very small.
No, they still have
portion,
commercial
but
in there.
how
They
much
trimmed
of
some of the
have-
building.
yeah, they've had, it's shifted.
It sure has. It's become, it's residential. If you want all residential, no problem.
No, it has commercial in the.
It has.
Yeah,
But-
okay, commercial on the bottom, but we're looking for, we've been looking.
But we're not gonna end up doing what you're saying.
But we're
But-
50% commercial?
Well, we'll see. I mean, what I'm saying is,
You can't do it, the overlay's not available for them.
They can't do that, they can't build what, nobody can build what they
yes,
would want to build if it's not 50% commercial, because it's a commercial overlay district.
no, I understand what you're saying, but maybe it's not the right time. I mean, the scale is just.
Well, right time is.
It's not the right thing. Now, the other thing to point out is, depending on the developers have different histories.
Yeah.
And, when you read about Cambridge Street and how Brighton and Alston is struggling with some of the projects there, where they keep on coming back with changes to the original plan, like, less parking or less this, because it's no longer a possible project, financial feasible.
Feasible project, yeah.
You also start wondering about, if what we're seeing is actually feasible or not.
But then those are also heavily residential.
Ask the developer, their projects.
Okay, so I just want to add one thing first. Excuse me for interrupting. And that is that, I take your point about the height and so forth. But the other thing that has been happening in parallel to this group meeting is that we very consciously went to EDAB, the Economic Development Advisory Board, to understand what was a viable project, right? And when they, at least when I went back to review some of their minutes and their comments, they were talking about minimum levels of density in order to make the project viable. And then, it started out at 5 and, it moved down to 4,
FAR,
and FAR 5 and FAR 4 in order to make the project economically viable. At which point, my recollection since May or so, when I joined this process, is that there had been a number of projects proposed, the infamous 20-story buildings on the west side, that progressed along, that regardless of the layouts, still met that fundamental density concern. So while it is possible, for example, that we might limit this to 8 stories or 7 stories or 10 stories, we also, in that process, went through a number of agreements about the vision of the space that we wanted, that included neighborhood access and open space and the interior circulation. And I appreciate that those things being settled you know, can fade in the context of like what 14 stories is in terms of looming over the whole project. But when we looked at those things over the course of, you know, the winter and the spring, and we looked at other designs, there were lots of people who said, no, you can't have a wall across the whole space, and we can't have, you know, commercial that's inside of a citadel that nobody's going to get to. You know, we had various designs from the developers, and all of these proposals came with trade-offs, right? And so I think one of the reasons why this is sort of coming to a close, and not necessarily coming to a close that everybody is particularly happy about, is because given the density requirements, in order to be economically viable, which is one of the requirements of this project, because, you know, making proposals that are not economically viable is not in our interest. You know, having reached that point, we've gotten a lot of information, both from the public and from the community advisory group, about, you know, what works, what is part of the vision that we want, and what isn't. And one of the things that I think staff is experiencing is that, relatively speaking, you know, and important details aside, so, you know, we continue to hear those, the major parameters that we're talking about haven't really changed in the last several months. And so at some point, you know, as we said, we don't want this to go the way that the Lower Boylston project went and not get to town meeting. So in order to get it to town meeting, we have to meet all of these various deadlines. And that is what staff has been tasked to do.
So we never asked people what.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, a little amendments here.
I mean, you just reiterated what we already know. I want to make a comment about something else. If I could.
Okay.
I think that you guys haven't seen the forest for the trees. You know, walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it must be a duck. Okay. I think you should split this project apart. Okay. I don't think that we had enough input to the other parts of the zoning areas that we wanted to look at, as we did for this parcel that City Realty owns. And you just explained it in a very unique way. Why don't you just split it apart? I would not be in favor of approving or voting for the change in zoning of overlay of the entire area. You should split it apart and just make it one warrant article on the city property.
So that's very interesting. When we first looked at this and we got the proposal, we were looking at the whole area. Staff then proposed to split it up, and we had screams of outrage.
Well, that was before we got City Realty involved.
No.
It was after.
I beg your pardon. That was City Realty was right there at the time.
Well,
We got
you know,
screams of outrage.
sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees.
Well, which is which here?
The point is that.
But we also didn't know at that time how much time we were gonna spend on the rest of it.
Yeah, so, you know,
I
things.
mean, today, David had a great point.
Yeah.
And,
Well, so
you know, like, we hadn't really talked about
right.
these two other zones.
Yes, but in the draft,
Not as
zoning.
as the other.
They haven't been in design guidelines because we haven't seen the design guidelines until just now. But they were in the draft zoning right from the get-go. What you pay attention to does not necessarily match up to what was in the document. We were paying the most attention, I grant you, to the Chestnut Hill Office Park site. Absolutely.
I'll say the first thing that.
Basically, Michael said something to me that was really that I think is right on target. We know we've been successful if everybody's unhappy. Well, that's not entirely true. Either we've all done a terrible job because everybody's unhappy about it, or we've had the trade-offs that are necessary to make something happen. When we go to town meeting, we're going to find out which it is.
Right, and we need two-thirds for this.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think it's important to explain that this approach that we're proposing is a townwide approach. Like,
I've said that, I said that at the beginning, that I think the thing that's, we tended to focus, and I know I tended to focus myself on the dollars and cents. But really, the important thing is what that retail and commercial community and residential community too are going to look like and feel like, and what they look like internally and what they look like externally to the neighborhood, to the rest of the town, even to people.
But the question is really, the question is really like, do we want to change the scale of the town?
That's a much broader question.
But
that's
that's the question. That is
the
exactly
question.
the question.
No, it isn't, it really.
Yes, it is.
It
really the
isn't,
question.
because this is a unique site, which is
Yeah.
the whole point of getting this.
But all our other commercial, we're gonna have the same story in all the other commercial opportunities.
So.
That
look
we
at
can't
Harvard-
do anything other than.
Right. Look at Harvard Street where we upzone to 4 stories along the Lincoln Park.
I mean, there's gonna be Star Market, that's a pretty big site.
That's,
A couple of.
I don't think it's I don't even think that's 2 acres.
Oh, really?
All the way to the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking about Star Market in Washington Square?
Yes,
No,
Yeah,
no,
I don't think it's.
it goes all the way to.
it goes all the way to the back.
The whole, all the parking lots, all that is
Yeah.
theirs.
no, there's no way that that's going.
No, there's Stop and Shop and you.
I'm sorry, Stop and Shop,
No.
it'll be Stop and Shop, not Star
Well,
Market,
both,
you're right.
I mean, Starbucks is much bigger, but.
So Stop and Shop and TJ Maxx are the 2 obvious additional large, relatively large
Commonwealth.
commercial sites.
And Commonwealth,
I-
neither
one
one
Commonwealth.
wants to sell.
ComAv is split into many different
Yeah.
property owners.
It's all be, but.
Well,
No, along the south side of ComAv, there are multiple property owners.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the same thing as the little one.
And those
Here.
and the depth of that site, of those sites is half a block. This really is a unique site.
It's also south of, and when we talk
It's also
about,
on State Highway.
We'll see,
talking
right?
about
Well, as I said,
street site,
we'll find out whether we're all unhappy for the wrong
in
reason.
the south is residential, this is south of.
Okay, it's almost 8:45. Good heavens.
thank you.
Thank you all. Oh, sorry, the one last thing I said, I had a bunch of thank yous for the committee and for members of the public, in spite of the fact that they think I've been, well, I won't say. That they disagree with where we've come out. I also want to say thank you to staff and to you and to the departed Zach. Zach Kessler.
to Dak, hopefully he's very happy back with his
Hopefully,
family.
and to my partner in crime, and successor on this level board.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
You.
Um,